Today, I'm joined by Josh Gould, CEO of The Big Word. Josh represents the second generation of a family founded business that has grown into one of the world's largest providers of language services, delivering translation, interpretation, and localization in more than 250 languages through a global workforce spanning more than 80 countries. But what makes Josh's story especially compelling isn't simply the scale of the business, it's the decisions he's made behind the growth. Working alongside his father for more than 2 decades, transitioning leadership across generations, building a professional management team inside a family business, and embracing AI long before it became today's headline. And ultimately, leading the company through a major investment by private equity while preserving the family's long-term role in the business. It's a story about growth, governance, technology, and perhaps most importantly, knowing when leaders need to evolve along with the businesses they've built. Josh, welcome to Growing Up B2B.
Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you for having me.
Oh, great to have you with us. So for any of our listeners who may not be familiar with the big word, tell us in your own words what the company does and what problem or problems it's ultimately designed to solve.
So we are a B2G company, and most people have heard of B2B, which is business to business, or B2C, business to consumer. We are business to government primarily, and we also provide the US healthcare system with language services. We're a mission-driven business. There's around 14,000 people who are directly employed by the big word or contractors. And all of us are focused on one mission, and that is to eradicate the final barrier of communication, which we know is language. I could be in Kathmandu right now, and you are in the northeast of the US, and we can have a conversation just like we are. But if I wasn't speaking English and I was speaking Chinese, I'm sure you probably speak great Chinese, but your listeners wouldn't be able to understand. So that's the kind of thing we do, but we do it in a mission critical environment. So these are hospitals, military facilities or theaters of war, justice departments, so that's court systems, family courts, criminal courts, police stations. I always joke, Ed, if you're coming into contact with one of my linguists, it's probably not a good day, but it's also reality, unfortunately.
Or it could lead to a good day if I'm about to have a major surgery and I can't speak with the surgeon in a native dialect.
Yeah, well, I like your version. Maybe you're going to get cured of some terrible disease. And the interesting thing is that around 3 births a day happen with a big word interpreter in the room. And I was actually hearing a couple of days ago that an interpreter was interpreting during a high risk childbirth. There was a cord wrapped around the neck of the patient. Sorry, not the patient, the baby.
Maybe, yeah.
And the doctor was saying pant, and the interpreter was called in very quickly. They were actually on another job in the hospital. They were called in because the woman that was giving birth assumed, as the doctor was giving orders, it was push. And apparently that was strangling the baby. I'm not a doctor, so I don't understand. When she panted, the baby was born without too many issues in the childbirth. And it just goes to show the where the rubber meets the road in society and the importance of this. And I get a lot of political feedback, being a language service provider to government, especially to government. And people often say to me, but it's a waste of money. We shouldn't be paying for all these people who are here illegally. Now, I'm not political, and I certainly wouldn't come onto a podcast and talk politics, but I would talk facts. And the reality is that the vast majority of the United States huge companies and family businesses are created by grandchildren and children and direct immigrants, including my own. My
Mhm.
grandmother was American, but my father and I am British, and we've created lots of jobs here. If you look at some of our best businesses, SpaceX, Tesla, they are created by an immigrant. If we look at Google, it's run by an immigrant. If we look
Mm,
at IBM and Microsoft, you find the same story over and over again. So we are deeply ingrained into the fabric of society, ensuring that people with limited or no English have fair and equal access
mm.
throughout the US and Europe.
Yeah. I mean, aside from the Native Americans, we all came from somewhere,
Even the
at some
Native
point.
Americans, right? They
Yeah.
migrated
Yeah, true. True.
up north over hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you worked alongside your father for over 20 years. When you look back, what would you say was the greatest gift he gave you as a leader? What was it, something that you look back and say, wow, he imparted that and I've carried that forward and that was really great.
Belief, I would say.
Okay.
It sounds like, and I hate listening to podcasts and you hear these answers that are made for media. But actually, belief is critical. And just before we went live today, we were talking about the United States losing last night in the World Cup. And there's a big difference between the US team that we saw play last night and the one we saw earlier in the tournament. And it was just a belief. And belief is huge because look at the Forbes list of richest people. The vast majority of them should be people who have inherited great wealth because it's easier to make a billion when you inherit 500 million 20 years ago.
Hmm.
But actually, it's the reverse. In the majority of people you see in the Forbes list are self-made. And if you dig deeper into their stories, like Steve Jobs, whose parents had to or did abandon him, or Oprah, a multi-billionaire who was raped as a child throughout her entire childhood. What you find behind all these great leaders is a self-belief and a refusal to ever be a victim. And I think that that is critical. I come from generations of people who were enslaved, who had to leave their countries because they were persecuted. But we never saw ourselves as victims. We always had belief. And that was ingrained in me as a child from my father. I was a failure at school. I'm severely ADHD. I was drugged up so that I was either asleep or I was wild. And I was a major failure. And my father used to say to me, you see all those people with straight A's, they'll be failures as adults. Now,
Yeah.
some of them were successful. So if you're a straight A student and you're listening, I don't think it's a giant disadvantage, but you do have one major disadvantage that you didn't have to grow up learning how to overcome failure,
Mm,
learning how to deal and cope with that. So that's the second thing, Ed. It was belief, but combined with an acceptance of failure as part of the process.
mm. And what we see a lot in, when there are generational transitions is it's always healthier to let that next generation have the reins. The sooner the better, because what a tragedy it would be for founder led to hold on to the reins of leadership for too long, and only in the waning years of that person's life turn it over to that next generation, who only then discovers can I be successful or not successful in a leadership position very deep in my life. That.
I think it's a ginormous challenge, and not everyone is cut out to be a leader in business.
Mm,
And I think that's the problem with family businesses is they see intergenerational family businesses as the goal. Whereas I think if you want a successful family-owned business, you should separate leadership and
mhm,
business
mhm,
ownership itself. And I think that's critical. I had an amazing coach, and she's actually a shrink as well. She's called Julie Cantor. You can look her up. And she came into my life at a time when I was personally finding that challenge of managing through father and son and leadership transition. And I think my father would say the same. And she said to both of us in a room one day, and it stuck with me, and I wanted to share it today, that the business can run you, or you can run the business, but you can't have it both ways. Now, what she's really saying and what she meant here was you can fit the business around you, or you as a family can fit around the business. But if you are fitting the business around the family, you're not going to give the business a fair chance. And your competition don't have that issue.
Mm,
They're run by outside investors that are going to hire and fire based on success. They're going to hire and fire based on building a culture that's beyond a family. And if you're sat around messing with family politics, and trying to make everyone happy, you are burdened in a way that they are not. And ultimately, that's going to starve your company of revenue. Then you're going to have to reduce costs, and then you're in a negative spiral. So we always focus on building the business, not building a business around the family. And I think that that was a huge turning point for us, where we always put the business first.
mm. A lot of times, especially from guests on the show, it sounds like those that are most successful, um, some people might hear that putting the business first might sound a little cold, but oftentimes family governed businesses are putting the business first for the good of the family, for the benefit of the
Always,
family.
always for the good of the family.
And sometimes that means, if well qualified, that next generation successor steps up. And if not, somebody else does. But it's ultimately serving the business for the good of the family and in the best interests of the greater family, whatever that looks like in each scenario. So that certainly resonates. Now, interestingly, you said you started working with this coach who was also a therapist, and it sounded like at a bit of a turning point relative to your involvement in the business, your dad's involvement. Going back in time a bit, um, what were some of the challenges of navigating that, working alongside your father, ultimately taking a leadership role? Talk a little bit about that, some of the challenges.
Well, I think the greatest challenge, and your audience probably will know this and be able to see themselves in this, is the founder took ginormous risk. The founder mortgaged their home. The founder turned down high-paying jobs, typically, or other paying jobs in order to found the company. The next generation came in to a business that existed. Now, I mortgage my home to support the business, but I will never get the credit because no one knows that. No one cares about that. So you come into a business that's already existing and everyone thinks that you've got your job simply because of your last name. And I think that that's a real challenge. And you have two choices. You can resent it or you can prove everyone wrong. And that's the route that I took. I decided that I was going to prove everyone wrong. And if people wanted to say that I became the CEO simply because of my last name, that was going to be something that they would have to manufacture because my success would be undeniable to the onlooker.
Mm.
And you can say this is all ego, and you're probably right. But that's what drove me personally. And I love your podcast in particular because it's really honest and it's raw because typically you're interviewing people without investors. Now I have investors in the business and institutional backers, but that's my brand. I come with honesty, and most leaders have to have big egos in order to be successful, but they have to know how to channel it. So I also saw as part of my success and the way that I could take over and transition is I had to build my own team. I had to build a team of people who had great faith in me and great trust in me, not because of my family name, but because of what I could do for them. And
So,
that's the thing. Most people are going to get on a train that they think is going to take them to their destination that they desire as fast as possible. So that was the other step, Ed. I
mm,
built a team of people.
let's talk about that for a moment, because in many ways, and this is certainly shown up in different ways, shapes, and forms on this show, where the companies that are very successful and have scaled effectively, um, they tend to say, well, yes, we're a family business, but we're really more like a business that happens to be run or owned by a family, you know? So again, that business first idea. So talk for a moment about how you went about building that professional management and that professional culture while still honoring the legacy, honoring the fact that it is a family-owned enterprise, but ultimately you needed to bring that, which is, by the way, not uncommon for the second generation to bring order to the chaos, if you will.
Well, that's what they say, that the first generation makes the money, the second generation manages it, and the third generation spends it. So, you know, it's a generalization, but it's largely the truth. You know, the first generation watches their mother or their father work themselves to the bone and comes in with huge pressure to not screw up the 40 years of hard work that's come before them.
Mm,
But the third generation never sees that. What
yeah.
they see is success. They see birthright. They see many things, but not the hard yards that were made in the very beginning before this was even called a family business. So I think, people have to think really carefully about how they structure the business. And America's most famous family business is Walmart.
Mm,
But you don't see many executives and CEOs of Walmart as the Walton family who founded and started it because they knew that in order to maintain growth, they were going to have to bring in people that were better than the homegrown people. And I think non-family businesses have the same issue.
mm.
A lot of small businesses, they start up and they become like family. They look
Yes,
after
they
each
do.
other, and then they can't fire that person because the person that got you from 0 to 10 million is often not the person who's going to get you from 10 to 50. And the person from 10 to 50 million is usually never the one that's going to get you to 100 million. Sometimes it is, but more often than not, it's not. So therefore, you have to look at your business in that way, and you have to hire in the right people. Culture can be maintained, but you have to bring in people that align with your culture, but have the skill set beyond the culture. Because culture doesn't drive success. Culture helps replicate success. It helps protect success. But in of itself, it's nowhere near enough. Success actually comes from great strategy mixed with really hard yards, hard work over a long period of time.
Mm. So in your particular case, starting to build a more of a professional management team, um, looking back, was would you say you and your father were on the same page in your pursuit to do that? Was he okay with that? Was he okay with bringing in new talent where new talent was needed versus always looking from within and trying to hire up or develop up?
Yeah, actually, in my case, and judging by the way you asked the question, you see this the other way around. But in my case, it was harder on me than him. He was ensuring continuity, he was ensuring the business and his legacy. But for me, he was bringing competitors. And I always knew that my dad would hire the next CEO of the big word based on merit, not on family name.
Okay,
Didn't mean that the family, and again, you've got to remember, family businesses don't have to have family CEOs.
right.
Control sits with shareholders, not with CEOs. Ultimate control, anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
So my dad knew that, and he passed me up twice. as CEO.
Okay.
And he did offer me CEO originally, but under a deal that I couldn't accept. And I went and I took a small contract of the big word and funding from the big word, and I started my own company within the company. I became the CEO of TBW Global, a defense provider. We operated in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. We had over 400 employees. We generated a lot more cash in the end than the main business. And at that point, my father was like, okay, he's proven himself. And he wanted to merge the two companies together. And the deal was that I then take over as CEO. And there was an outside non-family CEO at the time.
Oh, wow.
And, I was prepared to work with him
Hmm.
and he could maintain his position as divisional head. But in the end, my father thought that's not going to work. And, I became CEO of the whole thing.
Wow, that's an impressive story. You actually had to truly prove yourself on your own accord. Uh, so in a sense, you are second generation, but in many ways functioning more like a founder led or a first generation in what you did in your path. That's very uncharacteristic.
Yeah, I mean that's my story. I see so many different family stories, and quite often you're seeing a shift now because of the way the economy has become volatile. It used to be in the 80s, I'm a child of the 80s, that you would invest in the stock market and the most you're going to see on an average day is like a bump of 0.1 to 0.2% one way or another. And now you can make 3, 4% in a single day, and there's all this leverage. Well, the same going on in the wider economy. And I think that you're starting to see all sorts of family businesses. I have a good friend and he manufactures bean bags. His original father's business went bankrupt. He started again the beanbag business out of the ashes of what was a rental business and use the machinery, use the knowledge, use the infrastructure. And now that beanbag business is wildly successful. It's the largest in Europe. And his dad, works with him and his brother works with him. But really, he's the founder of the business in many senses, although he wouldn't have been able to achieve what he has without his dad and without the original business. So you're starting to see lots and lots, and I'm sure in your life you work with a lot of businesses. It was never a straight line from A to B to C.
No, and there's always, I mean, there inevitably has to be some form of transformation happening, especially when you see a multi-generational business. What that tells me, if it's fourth gen or fifth, and we've even had a seventh generation on the show, each one of those generational turns represented some level of transformation to remain relevant, you know, to remain viable, and enough drive within that individual and enough leadership fortitude to navigate that next iteration. So, when you see something like fifth, sixth, or seventh, that's uncommon. That means there's that many people within the family that have that drive and that aptitude to say, let's hit the market again. Let's do it this way. Let's reform. Let's be agile. Let's move this way, and do so successfully.
Yeah, you've also got to know when to sell your business. And I
Mm,
don't think that that's really discussed in the family world because, in the PE world, which I operate in today, you're thinking about selling at the point you're considering even acquiring. You haven't even acquired it yet, and you're wondering, who am I exiting to? And I think that it is an important acknowledgement that businesses don't have to survive. There's no medals for getting to 100 years. The big word is a 45-year-old business this year. There's no medal. I don't win more business because I'm a 45-year-old business or second generation. So you have to also look at your business and say, you know, do we have the appetite to invest what is required in this world
mm,
of AI? Do we have the appetite to not pay the family members so much money this year and go and hire a bigger sales team or open up in a new geolocation? If the answer is no, then you have to understand that your competitors are going to do that and they are going to get an advantage over a period of time by that investment. And therefore, maybe this is the right time to exit the business. And then you
Mm,
have that conversation, well, what happens if Jennifer wants to take over one day? That's a negative, in my opinion. And by the way, folks, anyone who's listening to these podcasts, and I do a lot of these interviews, I always like to remind everyone this is all my opinion. There is many different opinions of many different successful people out, but in my opinion, at that point, you are going to end up with major issues. If you are maintaining a business that you don't want to invest in, that you don't want to take risk in order for someone else who may still be in diapers to take over, the chances of that business succeeding that long anyway are slim.
mm, mm. Good points. Yeah. And certainly, yes, we've seen many sides of that discourse. There's certainly some family businesses, is faced with an opportunity to earn life-changing money today. Would you take it? And the answer is absolutely not. We're not selling, we're not for sale. And they take a very hard line. And
Yeah,
others,
it's
and others
personal.
think differently.
Yeah. I think the reason why people decide not to take that money is far more important than whether you take that money.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if your reason is I'm investing in it, I'm loving in it, I'm
yeah,
driving it forward, like I am in the big word today,
hmm,
do not sell that business. Keep
yeah,
hold of it because you're probably not going to make more money in a lousy CD account or a multi-family home or whatever you're going to do when you're supposed to be
yeah,
retired.
yeah,
So stay in that business. But if your reason for keeping that business is to get it to the next generation, and that's your only reason, then that's okay too. But make sure you're investing in it from that perspective.
yeah. And I think it's also important to have um, a healthy plan B for those that are thinking, well, I'd like to see it
Yeah.
passed to the next generation, and all indications are that because we're speaking with a past guest, and that was the plan, right? There was a son in place that was going to be the path. Um, and at the 11th hour, the son said, you know what? I don't want it. And now a scramble ensued to go a different path. And they did. And they were successfully navigated that. But under, needless to say, probably under a bit more duress than there should have been.
Yeah, that's not good for business. Businesses need long-term leadership
Yeah.
transition. Uh,
And I think that's
yeah,
why so many endorse, if there is going to be succession, you put that in motion early, you
yeah.
know.
And there are exceptions. Like when private equity come in and acquire a business, quite often they will bring in their own teams, but they've been thinking about that for a long time. Or a trade will come in and acquire you and get rid of you because you don't need two CEOs and two CFOs.
Hmm.
But again, that's been planned way longer than you think it's been
Oh
planned.
yeah.
These well thought out transitions are critical because leaders have an outsized role. And I think as family, we sometimes don't really understand the power of our position and the power of our words because we don't know what it was like on the other side of that. Now, I do. I worked elsewhere. I know what it was like when the CEO spoke, and it created excitement and it created fear and all sorts of things, but everything was magnified. So if you're listening and you're the CEO of a family business, I assure you that however powerful you think your words are within your business and your thoughts are and your actions are, it's 10x that as a minimum. So
Mm,
when it comes to leadership transition, that becomes a big risk for everyone that, works in the business.
well said. The I want to turn to something that I found rather fascinating, and I think it's very germane to a lot of what we're talking about. But it's an exercise you take yourself through every summer, Josh, which is asking yourself one some might construe as a difficult question, which is, should I fire myself? Walk us through that exercise, and how do you honestly evaluate whether you're still the right person to lead the business, to lead the big word?
Sure. So I'm 42 now, Ed, but I still work on school years, partly because I've got kids that work on school years, and partly just, I don't know, I think we got it wrong with January. September should be month one of the year. So every August, as you mentioned, I run a process to decide whether I should fire myself or continue for another year. And the way I do that is actually the way I hire top level executives. I use a scorecard. So I build out a scorecard and I say, these have been the priorities for the year. This is the priorities moving forward. And then you go from A, B, C, F. And if you've got an F there, you've got to have a really, really good reason to stay employed.
Hmm.
So I then grade myself along the lines of A, B, C. Now you can say I'm biased because I'm marking myself. And, you know, your bias, yes, shapes you. However, I'm pretty brutally honest. And I've had an F before, a few years ago. I've had an F. And I wasn't sure whether I was the right person. And I gave myself about 3 months to turn it around.
Hmm.
And I went there and my actions far surpassed my own, assumptions of what I was capable of doing. And I gave myself the job again. So this is something that I do. I do it every August. I'll be doing it again shortly. I'll be reviewing the past year, reviewing what is required, reviewing what's needed. And if I think someone else can do a better job than me, I'll be the first to speak to my investors to say, guys, it's time.
Hmm.
Let's figure out a transition.
Hmm.
Let's figure out something that happens over the next 6 to 12 months.
Hmm.
Because I've got way too much money invested of my own and my family's money in the big word to put that at risk for a second-rate CEO. And I think
Hmm.
it's a really important thing for all leaders, especially leaders of family businesses, where you typically never had an appraisal. So you've got to do your own appraisal.
Yeah.
There's something else that I've done in the past as well, Ed. I brought in people to do a 360. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's where they go and they speak to all your direct reports and they do their own appraisal of you. And these appraisals are typically done where you don't know what that person said. So I've done that once before. It's horrific. I hated every second of it. I was pleasantly surprised, though, of the outcome, which was people were much happier with me and had a lot more confidence in me than I imagined. But the downside was, and I'm repeating what the person who did it says, you're a bit of a bull in a china shop. You leave a trail of destruction. So whilst you're incredibly successful and you know how to take people on that ride, you're also disruptive.
Hmm.
And I always thought that was a good thing, but they didn't. And I think that that did make me change. So that's the other thing that I urge family businesses to do, bring people from the outside and get these 360s done because people aren't going to tell you how they really feel. They're afraid for their jobs and they're afraid for their careers.
Hmm. Well, in addition to being brutally honest with yourself, I would add to that being also very open-minded to criticism and suggestion, and also to have the wherewithal to do that self-assessment, incredibly self-aware, to know yourself and to know yourself so well to be able to actually step outside yourself and to do that evaluation. So that certainly, so I hope you get good marks this August, Josh, for sure.
Yeah, I never get great marks across the board. No, I'm very critical of myself. And quite often what you'll see in the big word is in September's, that's when the pace changes and things change because, no CEO is knocking out the park in every area of their business, in every
Yeah,
area of their scorecard.
for sure, for sure. So getting back to the dynamics with your dad. So after a couple of passes, he eventually said, "Okay, you're the CEO," and he eventually recognized, okay, that means it's time for him to step away from day-to-day leadership. Talk about the transition and how it worked, and if it worked well, why it worked well. If it didn't work so well, what in the look back you could say, hey, we could have done it a little better, and here's how. Talk about that experience for a moment.
So my dad, Larry Gould, sold a business in 1998 that was doing 25 million pounds, so like $35 million of revenue. So with inflation, you're talking like $70 million of revenue. And he retired and he was probably around my age. And I remember we were like lower middle class. We lived a nice life. We went on vacations. I shared a room with my sister in a small house. And then all of a sudden we had a house with a swimming pool and a driver. So my father did retire. And after 12 months, my mum told him, you got to get out of the kitchen. You're driving me mad. I love you, but you're going back to work. So he sucked at retirement. I would say he was a retirement failure. And ever since that day, he told me that he was going to die around the boardroom table at an old age. So don't expect to take over the business. And I
Okay.
didn't. And I actually didn't expect to take it over, which is why I set up my own business within a business.
Well, that's a pretty definitive statement, right?
It is. And when people say that, you should believe them because it's their goal.
Mhm.
However, no one knows what it's going to be like to be 70 plus. And I think my dad, like me, he's very good at doing a self-assessment and he understood the energy and the drive that was required. So at some point, he decided to bring in a CEO that had his younger energy and drive. And he became the executive chairman. And that CEO didn't work out. I eventually merged the companies and became CEO of the business. But my father had already gone through a transition for 2 years.
Okay.
And he had learned from that because the second time round, he said, okay, I can't leave and go from being the mayor of the business and all of this adrenaline and fear and excitement to sitting on a beach all day. So what he did was he lined up jobs at Cornell to teach and mentor and investments to dabble in and look at, and he got into gardening. So he planned his life outside of the business, and then he became an executive chairman. And the difference between a non-exec chairman and an executive chairman is executive kind of works in the business, but it is part-time. So he still
Hmm.
had his office, he still had a reason to wake up. And then that was a couple of years transition. And when we sold the business, he moved out completely of any permanent and full-time role, but he still sits on the board today. He's still a great mentor to many people across the business. He's an advisor, and our investors, have a lot of value for his advice and what he says.
Interesting. It also raises another issue that some of the family governed businesses that we know and work with, where there isn't the successor that's within the family, and ultimately they're selling either to another buyer, to private equity, or they're cashing out. They often don't think about what's next for me, you know. And it sounded like maybe for your dad there was a little bit of that. They didn't really have the plan, the 2.0 of his life. Although what's gratifying to hear is that he found it, right? He found it in Cornell. He
He
found it
did because he
mentoring.
learned. Yeah.
Yeah,
In fact,
yeah.
my dad, Ed, gave a famous speech. It's famous within KPMG in the UK. So KPMG bought my father to speak to a bunch of owner operators looking to sell their business. And he got up and he started his speech and he started telling them about how terrible it is to sell your business and how you have nothing to wake up for. And you get this great big check and you get all this money. And then everyone takes their share of that money and the tax man takes their share of the money. And then you're making yourself coffee in the kitchen and your wife is wondering what you're still doing at home. And a big deal fell through that was worth, in today's money, roughly $1 billion because the guy said, I know what he's talking about. I don't want to be that person. And he was never asked to speak again after that. But he actually wrote a book on it. And I think it's
What's
on the lines of, how to retire and still have a sex life. The book was not a huge success, and neither was his retirement, Ed.
well, at least he wrote a book and had the wherewithal to do that, and to be honest, in front of an audience at KPMG. So, lots of credit to your dad for that. So, I want to talk about another. Obviously, it's been a hot topic now, but um, probably to you a little bit almost passé, because and that's the subject of AI. As I understand it, your company was investing in AI and machine learning well before most businesses knew to even call it AI or what AI was. So, Josh, talk about that. What were you seeing, um, early on or very early on that others were not seeing, whether others in your industry or others in industries at large? What were you seeing early that enabled you to be in that early adopter position?
Well, let me frame it for you. There was this business called Trados in my industry. And what it did was it took previously used translation content. This was human content. And then it would consider its accuracy based on whether the sentence before or after was already translated and was also in the database, or whether there was a high percentage of that sentence translated in the past. And it would create these things called fuzzy matches, exact matches, and in context exact. And this was in the 90s. By 2002, 2003, it was mainstream. And we had just acquired a company that's largest client was Honda. And months later, when we applied this, we realized that we could cut our own cost base by over 70%.
Oh.
And my auntie thought this was awesome. My auntie was the head of operations, and my father did not. I've just taken another mortgage against my house. And after making all this money, I'm now living with no salary. I'm selling all the properties I invested in from last time to keep this business going to acquire these companies. And all of a sudden, there's this tech, and we might be making 70% today, but someone like me, 10 years younger, is coming along and going to Honda to say, I'll sell it at 30% cheaper than the big word. So he decided to go to Honda and tell them. And Honda in Japan said, thank you very much, Mr. Gould, for telling me about this machine learning. Now, machine learning, by the way, is AI. It's just AI is the common name for it. If you think like
Mhm.
machine learning is the equivalent of Latin name, but it's the same thing.
Understood.
And Honda said, we were only spending less than 1% of what we could spend if we had unlimited budgets. And so they said, don't worry, we will spend more money with you next year. And they took the business away that they were giving to other companies and they gave it all to the big word. And Honda became our largest client. And off
Wow.
the back of that, GE became our largest client. So we weren't always a business to government contractor.
Mhm.
In 2013, Google hired us to work on a program using neural machine translation. And neural machine translation is the exact technology that ChatGPT uses today, that Claude uses, that Copilot uses. The difference is it's not large language model, meaning it's not tuned on the entire internet. You had to, back in those days, make your own content to tune it in or buy it. And
Hmm.
that's called corporate. So we had a huge amount of experience in helping Google with that. And, same thing happened again. It was deployed, it brought down the unit rate by 30, 40%, but yet spending went through the roof at unit rate. So people were getting more units done, and actually the net effect on my industry, the language services industry, is we've seen about a 6% growth year on year, including this year, by the way.
Mm.
So we've been through these disruptions before, and what I found is the people who make the technology, the Elon Musks of the world, the Anthropic board of the world, those folks are incentivized to tell you that the world is over, that there's no need for your business, that the government's going to pay you a generic universal income because robots are going to do it for you, because they want you and everyone else to invest your $10,000 into their business as a hedge, and they pump up their price, and now you and everyone else is invested in them either through your 401k, through your ETFs, or directly. And they now are a business. Now, interestingly enough, SpaceX just went public on the back of their big AI program and a couple of other of their moonshots, which, if you're into physics, are largely impossible. You can't mine an asteroid cheaper than you can mine many places on planet Earth that we haven't touched yet. And you certainly can't live on Mars, not unless you figure out how to live without a heart and any skin. So it ain't happening. And SpaceX is worth $2 trillion. My company, The Big Word, makes way more money than SpaceX, multitudes more money. We are not worth $2 trillion. But they have told you about the fact that you're all going to be replaced with their products and their robots. So therefore, very clever people have been acquiring them. The good news is it's legal market manipulation. The companies that have taken AI, and I've spent $15 million of my own and my investors' money in building AI products in the last 3 years. So I'm a proponent of it. I'm not anti it. But the people who have looked at AI in the same way as we look at HI, in other words, it's a resource. It has downfalls and it has capabilities. And
Hmm.
if you can then take AI and HI, put them together, you find that there's gray area in between. And if you can get really good at that gray area, that's where you can make the most money. That's where you can take what humans do really well and then supersize it with automating through AI agents the monotonous tasks in your call center or in your website. Those are the type of things that you can deploy AI. But what you will find, and you don't have to believe me, go and Google it. In 2023, which is 3 years ago, believe it or not, AI became mainstream in every single aspect of corporate America. As of today, unemployment is lower than it was 3 years ago. However, we have spent trillions of dollars collectively in R&D of automation and AI. And you can see that throughout history, by the way. You look at farmers when the combine harvester came
Yeah.
in. So my strong advice to your listeners is don't ignore AI. It's not going away. It's like the internet. There'll be a dot-com bust at some point for AI, but it didn't mean the internet was a load of nonsense. It just meant it was more of an evolution than a revolution. So invest in it, embrace it. Your competitors they're going to drive their unit rates down and they're going to improve their services using AI. So you need to do that and you need to do it better and quicker than they are. But don't be afraid of it. It's not going to replace you.
Mm. Well said. So, given your vantage point and being, an early understanding, early adoption of this technology, if you were to look out, say, 5 years from now, where do you think it's heading, Josh? In your opinion, where do you think it's going? You alluded to there probably will be some form of a bust, and sometimes I think of these cycles as it's with every technology, it starts with uninformed optimism. Oh, it's great. It can do everything and anything, right? And then some uninformed pessimism. Well, it's not that good and it's kind of lousy. But then eventually I think we get to a balanced position, which is kind of an informed realism, hey, it's good, it's bad. Here's where it fits. Here's how it can be used, and here's where it makes sense in our world. Where do you see it? How do you see it as we look to the future?
Well, as a contrarian, I hate to agree with your answer, but I think you're spot on. You know, we're going to go through that process of this was aspirational and this is reality.
Mm,
And about 20% of all CapEx. So, for those who are not familiar with what CapEx is, they are the one-off big spends that you make to build out machinery or software. So, about 20% of CapEx, typically in a normal investment cycle, ends up as high ROI. And the vast majority of it ends up as legacy junk. So I think we're going to see the same here. I think that, the billions and potentially trillions that are going to be invested in it's going to be largely junk. But there's going to be some phenomenal tools that are built as a result of this. And let's just use your podcast as an example. As of today, you can take this recording and press a few buttons and you'll get all the ums and the ahs out and the fluff out, and you don't have to do anything. And then you can press another button and distribute it all over the world. And then you can hopefully integrate the big word into it and automatically transcribe everything to every language. That's the power of it. But guess what, Ed? It's not tomorrow and it's not in 3 years, it's today.
mm,
So I think a lot of the gains that we've made in the last 3 years are going to be built upon, and that's what you're going to see. I don't suspect, and I hope I'm wrong because I hate doing my own laundry, but I don't suspect that we're going to have a robot make us dinner and another robot take us out, take the kids to school, and another robot, take my dog on a walk. We already have a car that can drive itself. I have one. It's called a Tesla, and it's awesome, and it uses a lot of AI and it will
mm,
get better and better and better, and you'll see the robo taxis. So these are the kind of things that people will point to as dramatic shifts. But guess what? It already is good today. I mean, the only reason why my car doesn't drive itself every single time without me in the front seat is the law. It's not reason because my car could crash when I press that automatic button, but it's less likely to crash than if I'm driving it. And I
mm.
consider myself a decent driver, Ed. But the laws also have to change. The one thing that I do suspect is you'll see regulation come in.
Mm,
Now, America will hold off on the regulation for as long as possible, but eventually it's going to have to come in because the AI is already becoming a threat to national security. So regulation typically starts with loosely defined rules, and that's what you see now, where Claude had to suspend its version 5, I believe. I forget the exact name of it, and they had to go and rethink it, and they had to do something which we've no idea what they did, and then all of a sudden they made it available again.
mm,
So these type of things will happen. Regulation will come in. Regulation is needed. I know that most people that listen to a business podcast are anti-regulation, but in reality, it's there to create an economy that can continue to grow long term and for everyone.
mm. Interesting. And how about the big word? When you look out to the future, if you look out 5 years from now, what do you see for the big word as an entity?
So I think if I look out into the long-term future, I'm looking only 6 months away.
Okay.
And that's how quick development cycles are today. So we already have developed full AI interpretation to spoken word.
Hmm.
However, it can't be used in a court facility. Why? Because it's 95% accurate. You and I wouldn't know that it's not accurate. We think it's a miracle, it's magic. But imagine being accused wrongly of murder and knowing that the person who's speaking in court and they are the witness is only going to be 95% accurate in their testimony. Well, that's not good enough. And it's not good enough in a health situation.
Mm,
So I do think that the gap will close, but it won't close to 100%. And here's why. Well, number one, it's mathematics. Behind all of this AI, essentially, is just math. So there is a limit to how good it can get. And actually, I think we're close to hitting that limit today. Another reason is training itself on itself. The vast majority of content AI is training on. In fact, the vast majority of content we create as humanity now is AI. So it's stuck. And I think
mm,
for the big word, we will be able to develop really good triage services. We're going to be, over the next 12 months, creating much better patient experiences where you'll still get our human video interpreters, over the phone interpreters, human in-person interpreters with the doctor. But when you turn up to the hospital and there's no one to translate those forms for you, that's where we apply AI within the applications, and it's really the experience that we're working on. It's also if you're in my supply chain and you want to call up to complain because you didn't get paid what you thought you were going to get paid, AI is going to be able to look that up for you and explain it quickly. It's also going to be able to tell us if we got it wrong, which has happened
mm,
before.
mm,
So this is kind of the world, but I think most of this is going to happen in the next 6 to 7 months. I've been investing in this for 20 years. So I also think there are a lot of companies, family businesses in the mid-market who are fat and happy and greedy, and they still are insistent on not spending money on technology because they want everyone in their family to have a Mercedes S-Class or a Range Rover. And I think those companies are making huge mistakes and they're carrying Mildred because Mildred has been working with us for 40 years. Well,
yeah.
I've not got any Mildreds in my business working for 40 years. And I'm investing that money in technology. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to undercut whilst delivering better service, whilst you try and convince yourselves that that white glove service is what your clients want, when actually they don't. They're buying an outcome, not a process.
Mm,
And those companies will be forced to sell. So I think, we will start acquiring those companies who were what I call fat and happy. And if you're listening to this, don't be one of them. I am on team family business here. I think that family businesses are part of the American dream. They're part of society, and what you do, Ed, to help them transform is spectacular. And if you haven't spoken to Ed about what he can do, please do.
well, thank you for that. And that's a great answer. Two more questions. Normally, I'd ask, when you look 5 years from now, what's in store for Josh Gould? But maybe I'll ask you in a month because that's when you do your self-assessment. So, um, if you were to look at the crystal ball, does Josh get another turn at the wheel post August?
Yeah, so I am going to be frank. I don't think I'm coming out with the highest grades this year.
Okay.
Sure, we've done well as a business, but business success and the success of a leader have different timings. So there's a lag. If the leader starts underperforming, it's usually a year to 3 years before the business should really feel it when you've built a management team the size of mine.
Hmm.
So I've had some words with myself, and here's the thing, Ed, I do it like anyone else would in the business. I know it's coming up, so I'm going to fix the problems before I have to assess myself negatively. And in my business, my biggest problem that I face today is getting my junior and middle management to a level of performance that I would expect of a senior management.
Hmm.
And for that, I don't think I've supported them enough, if I'm being honest.
Hmm.
So I am doing everything I can between now and the day that I do that in August, usually towards the very end of August, so that I can say I spotted the problem, I acknowledged it, and I rectified it, and therefore I can't give myself an A, but there's no C's
Not
and
bad.
F's for that.
Definitely not.
So that's what I'll be doing. I'll be very focused on junior and middle management and upskilling them and bringing in some new and exciting people as well, because I think that's part of the process.
Awesome. Awesome. And last question for you. If any of our listeners wanted to connect either with you personally, Josh, to learn more about you or to learn more about the big word, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I have my own podcast. It is not as professional and prolific as Ed's, but you can catch me. I do a lot of M&A discussion, M&A preparation. It's a talking head. You can hit me up on Execraft if you go into YouTube. It's only available on YouTube. And if you want to speak with me personally, as you can tell, Ed, this is my passion. It's my hobby. I love to chat. You know what to do. You go to LinkedIn and search for Josh Gould, the big word, and hopefully I pop up.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, to wrap up here, Josh, what stands out in your story is that the biggest threat to a successful business isn't actually technology. Um, it's sometimes believing that yesterday's leadership model will still work tomorrow, whether it's embracing AI long before others, bringing in professional management, partnering with private equity, or having the humility and the self-realization awareness to ask whether, hey, am I still the right person to lead? Josh, your journey and story are really all about continuous reinvention. And that's, I think, a lesson that every single one of our listeners and every family-owned business can certainly learn from. So, Josh, thanks so much for sharing your story and your unique perspectives. Again, we've been speaking with Josh Gould, CEO of The Big Word, and I'm your host, Ed Delia. And this has been another episode of Growing Up B2B. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Josh, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into Growing Up B2B. To explore more episodes and insights, visit podcast.delianet.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. Having worked with hundreds of family-led businesses across my career, and being a second-generation leader myself, I'm on a mission to help every family business I meet achieve next-level growth for their organization. So feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn and let's support each other. You can also find out more about my company at delianet.com. Again, I'm your host, Ed Delia, and thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.